Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander through the strange, scented, and sometimes unsettling world of beauty in ancient Rome. A world where looking perfect wasn't just an option, it was expected, and the ways people tried to achieve it could be, well, unusual to say the least. Before we get started, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these quiet journeys into history. And while you're at it, drop a comment below to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan or a small background hum, and let yourself sink into your chair or bed. Let your shoulders release, and wrap yourself in a blanket, if you have one. Tonight, we're going to move slowly through Roman streets, baths and private chambers, exploring the oils, powders, perfumes, and sometimes peculiar treatments that people use to shape their appearance. Over the next 21 points, we'll see how Romans cared for their skin, hair, teeth, and overall look, from everyday routines to exotic ingredients and rituals that might seem strange to us now. Each step will flow into the next, letting us drift gently through this world and hopefully helping you unwind as we move together through time. So take a deep breath, let your eyes soften, and let's step quietly into ancient Rome, where beauty was a ritual, obsession, and art form all at once. In the heart of ancient Rome, the idea of beauty was never a mere personal preference, nor simply a matter of superficial adornment. It was a silent language woven deeply into the fabric of daily life, a reflection of social standing, wealth, and moral character, and a measure by which the city quietly, yet relentlessly, judged those who walked its streets. Rome, with its grand marble forums, bustling marketplaces, and sunlit villas, was a place where appearances were constantly observed and interpreted. From the narrow alleys lined with small modest homes to the expansive estates of the elite, every individual, woman, man, or even child, was subtly expected to present themselves in a way that harmonized with the ideals of the society around them. These ideals were not invented overnight, but had evolved over centuries, influenced by earlier cultures, philosophical writings, and the pervasive desire to project control, refinement, and social distinction. The city's obsession with appearance was in part practical, in part symbolic, and in part an expression of the hierarchy that governed Roman life. Yet it permeated every interaction, every glance, and every gesture, creating a rhythm to daily existence that intertwined beauty with survival in subtle ways. From the very earliest hours of the morning, when the soft light of dawn filtered through open windows and courtyards, Romans would awaken not only to face the duties of the day, but also to confront the meticulous work of transforming their outward selves. In the private chambers of women, scented oils glimmered in small handcrafted vessels, waiting to be applied with delicate fingers to the skin. Powdered minerals were carefully blended to create a smooth, pale complexion, an effect highly prized in a culture that associated paleness with refinement, leisure, and exemption from labor under the sun. The faces of men, too, were not exempt from the scrutiny of societal standards. Well-trimmed beards or clean-shaven cheeks signaled discipline, civility, and a measured attention to one's public image. Each element of appearance, from the arch of an eyebrow to the shine of a fingertip, could silently communicate wealth, virtue, or social ambition, and the effort devoted to maintaining these signals was often substantial. The Roman understanding of beauty was inherently tied to balance, symmetry, and proportion, reflecting broader cultural ideals inherited from earlier Hellenistic influences. Philosophers and writers frequently linked physical beauty to moral virtue, suggesting that the well-maintained body mirrored an orderly, disciplined mind, and a controlled, respectable character. In literary works and surviving accounts, one finds repeated admiration for those whose features were harmonious, and whose grooming was meticulous, as if the body were a canvas upon which personal and societal ethics were subtly, yet visibly, inscribed. In this context, a woman's smooth skin, perfectly coiled hair, and subtle blush of color could communicate more than mere aesthetic pleasure. They were markers of her family's status, her husband's discernment, and her own dedication to the unspoken codes of propriety. Similarly, a man's groomed appearance could project authority, command respect, and signify a careful balance between vigor and refinement. strength, and civility. Underlying these ideals was an unspoken pressure that extended far beyond the elite. While wealthy Romans could access imported oils, rare minerals, and expert attendants to maintain their appearance, even the modest inhabitants of the city absorbed the cultural expectation that grooming and decorum were essential. Small touches, combing hair into tidy styles, removing dirt and calluses, applying scents, became daily rituals for a wide array of citizens, reflecting the pervasive belief that neglect of personal appearance could invite social censure or signal moral laxity. In the narrow streets of Rome, where neighbors observed one another closely, even subtle lapses in grooming could carry implications, and the effort to conform, however quietly, shaped rhythms of daily life in subtle but enduring ways. Yet Roman beauty ideals were not static. They evolved in response to changing tastes, foreign influences, and the practical realities of life in an urban empire. Greek aesthetics, with their emphasis on proportion, muscular harmony, and delicate facial features, provided a philosophical and artistic foundation, while the constant flow of people, goods, and ideas through the Mediterranean introduced new scents, oils, and cosmetic techniques. The Roman approach to beauty, therefore, was both conservative and adaptive, anchored in tradition, yet enriched by the exotic and the innovative. It is in this intersection of cultural inheritance and creative experimentation that the rituals and products we will explore later begin to make sense, revealing a civilization that pursued beauty with an intensity that often blurred the line between care and obsession, utility and art, everyday practice and ceremony. As the city awoke each morning, the sun casting its first glow over tiled rooftops and marble columns, Romans engaged in rituals that were simultaneously personal and social. The act of grooming was never entirely private. Mirrors, often small and polished from metal, reflected faces that were scrutinized with an eye for symmetry, clarity, and smoothness. Oils were warmed, fragrances blended, and powders meticulously applied, all with the knowledge that one's appearance could ripple outward, affecting how one was perceived at the forum, in the baths, and within the intimate circle of friends and family. This careful choreography of the self was emblematic of a society in which visual impression carried weight comparable to speech or action, a silent performance observed and interpreted by countless eyes in a city that never truly slept. In understanding Roman beauty ideals, it is essential to recognize the ways in which these standards shaped daily life, not merely through cosmetic applications, but through a complex web of social expectation, personal discipline, and cultural aspiration. The pursuit of beauty was intertwined with moral and social codes, economic capability, and aesthetic philosophy. It framed the rhythms of morning and evening, dictated the use of ingredients both common and exotic, and inspired a meticulous attention to detail that persisted across generations. Even in the quieter moments when a woman smoothed oil over her forearm, or a man combed his hair before stepping into the sunlight, the ideals of Roman beauty whispered through every gesture, a reminder that in this civilization, appearance was a lens through which life itself was continuously interpreted. And so, as we begin to explore the world of Roman beauty treatments, it is important to carry with us an understanding of these overarching ideals. The oils, powders, perfumes, and sometimes unusual rituals that followed were not merely indulgences. They were deeply rooted expressions of identity, status, and social communication. Each treatment reflected a desire to align oneself with the expectations of the city, to harmonize with the rhythm of life in Rome, and to participate in a cultural tradition that elevated appearance to an art form. It is within this context that we begin our journey, moving from the broad notions of beauty into the intimate details of daily grooming, bathing, and preparation, tracing the rituals that shaped not only bodies but the very atmosphere of ancient Roman society. As the first golden light of morning spilled across the rooftops and courtyards of Rome, the city slowly stirred to life, and within private chambers and modest homes alike, Roman women began their daily ritual of preparation. These morning routines were more than simple acts of hygiene. They were deliberate practices shaped by centuries of cultural expectation, philosophical reflection, and social signaling. From the wealthy matrons in sprawling villas to the modest wives and daughters inhabiting smaller insulae, the rhythm of grooming created a quiet but persistent framework that structured the start of every day. a dance of oils, perfumes, and gentle motions intended to both preserve the body and align it with the prevailing standards of beauty. For the elite women, mornings often began with the careful removal of sleep from the eyes and face, followed by the application of scented oils extracted from olive, almond, and myrtle, warmed gently in small decorative bowls to achieve a consistency that would absorb smoothly into the skin. These oils were not merely for scent, they served to cleanse, soften, and protect, forming a subtle barrier against the drying effects of sun and wind, which could be harsh even in the sheltered courtyards of Rome. Women would apply them in long, deliberate strokes, moving from the tips of their fingers across the forearms, shoulders, and décolletage, smoothing and rubbing until the surface of the skin caught the light with a muted sheen. Each gesture was performed with a precision that reflected the belief that the body was a canvas upon which beauty could be cultivated, a space where careful attention to detail both celebrated the natural form and demonstrated social sophistication. Alongside oils, perfumes were an integral part of the morning routine. Fragrant resins, flowers, and herbs were steeped or pressed into highly concentrated oils, their scents lingering in the air like a soft veil around the body. Women would dab small quantities onto the wrists, behind the ears, and along the nape of the neck, letting the aroma mingle subtly with the natural scent of the skin. These fragrances were highly personal, yet they also communicated status and refinement. Rare imports from Egypt or Arabia signified both wealth and cultivated taste. Perfumes were often applied after bathing, which itself could be an elaborate ritual, and before the careful arrangement of hair and application of cosmetic powders, creating a layered, multi-sensory impression that spoke of meticulous care. Daily skincare, though less understood in chemical terms than today, was a practiced art. Women of all social classes recognized the value of smoothing and protecting the skin, employing methods that ranged from gentle washing with water and soft cloths, to exfoliating with fine sand or crushed seeds. All wealthier women might access formulations containing finely ground pearls, chalk, or other minerals to lighten the complexion, reflecting the prevailing ideal that paleness signified refinement and the leisure to avoid outdoor labor. These powders were applied with small brushes or cloths, carefully distributed across the forehead, cheeks, and chin, blending seamlessly to create a uniform tone. In more modest households, simpler combinations of oils, ash, and mild soaps provided similar effects, demonstrating that even without luxurious ingredients, attention to the face remained central to a woman's daily preparation. The ritual of hair care began almost simultaneously with the skincare routines. Women would comb and untangle their hair using wooden or bone combs, sometimes infused with subtle oils to reduce breakage and enhance shine. Long hair, often considered a marker of femininity and desirability, was braided, coiled, or twisted into styles that ranged from simple and functional to complex arrangements signifying status. The act of styling was both practical and symbolic. It preserved the appearance of order and refinement, while also creating a visual narrative of patience, elegance, and adherence to societal norms. For the wealthy, trained attendants or slaves might assist in intricate styles, ensuring that every coil, twist, and ribbon was precisely placed, whereas women of modest means would perform these tasks alone, or with the help of family members, each gesture echoing the same cultural expectations. In addition to oils, perfumes, and hair care, the morning rituals included attention to the hands, nails, and feet. Nails were often carefully trimmed and occasionally colored with natural dyes derived from plants, creating subtle variations in tone that enhanced the overall impression of meticulous grooming. The use of pumice stones or gentle abrasives to smooth rough skin on the hands and feet was common, reflecting an understanding that every visible part of the body contributed to the overall perception of beauty. Even the smallest details, softened knuckles, polished nails, and lightly scented skin were part of an interconnected web of practices aimed at aligning appearance with the prevailing ideals of the time. It is important to recognize that these routines, though deeply ingrained, were shaped not only by aesthetic preference, but also by social context and available resources. Wealth determined access to rare oils, imported fragrances, and skilled attendants, creating a visual hierarchy in which the elite could achieve effects beyond the reach of common citizens. Yet, within these constraints, women of all classes adapted practices to suit their circumstances, demonstrating creativity and persistence. The rituals themselves, repeated day after day, were as much about cultivating discipline, rhythm, and self-awareness as about physical transformation. In this sense, the morning routine became both a personal and social performance, quietly observed by family, neighbors, and servants, reinforcing a shared understanding of what it meant to be appropriately prepared for the public eye. By the conclusion of these early hours, a Roman woman's body had been treated to multiple layers of care, each chosen for its ability to enhance, protect, or communicate. Oils and perfumes created a tactile and olfactory elegance, powders and scrubs shaped the complexion, and hair arrangements reflected social refinement. These practices, performed with patience and attention, were a means of asserting agency within the bounds of societal expectation, transforming the private ritual of self-care into an outwardly visible marker of identity. Even in moments of quiet solitude, the act of grooming reinforced a woman's connection to cultural ideals, linking the body to philosophy, morality, and social perception. Thus, the morning routines of Roman women illustrate a delicate balance between practicality, aesthetic aspiration, and social signaling. They reveal a civilization in which daily life was rhythmically punctuated by acts of care, and where beauty, far from being incidental, was embedded in the very structure of living. These rituals, flowing seamlessly from bath to oil, from powder to perfume, and from combed hair to manicured nails, exemplify a culture in which attention to detail shaped both self-perception and public impression. Through these practices, women of Rome navigated the intertwined worlds of personal desire, societal expectation, and the ever-present gaze of their community, setting the stage for more specialized and sometimes peculiar treatments that would follow in both private chambers and public baths. As the city of Rome gradually awakened to the warmth of the morning sun, the distant clatter of carts on stone streets and the murmur of early conversations provided a gentle backdrop to a ritual that was both public and private, communal yet intimately tied to personal grooming, the visit to the baths. These bathhouses, known as thermae, or balnea depending on their scale, were central to Roman life, serving as places of cleansing, socialization, and ritualized care of the body, where the pursuit of hygiene and beauty intertwined seamlessly with civic and cultural engagement. For women and men alike, bathing was rarely a hurried affair. It was an experience structured by careful attention to sequence, temperature, and the tools of the trade, forming a rhythm that permeated both body and mind. Entering a Roman bath was to step into a world suffused with warmth, moisture, and scent. The air was often thick with steam rising from large pools of heated water, and the surfaces glistened with moisture, reflecting light that filtered through high windows or open ceilings. In the early hours, when crowds were lighter, women of various social classes could navigate these spaces with a quiet sense of anticipation, bringing with them small containers of oils, combs, and exfoliating tools. The architecture itself encouraged a journey through the bathing process from the frigidarium, with its cold water, to awaken the body, to the tepidarium, a warm room that relaxed muscles and prepared skin for treatment, and finally to the coldarium, the hot room where pores opened, oils absorbed, and the body was most receptive to cleansing rituals. Each step was deliberate, a passage from the ordinary world into a space dedicated to care and transformation. Within this environment, hygiene and beauty were inseparable. Women would begin by immersing themselves or allowing attendants to guide them through pools of water, the temperature carefully adjusted to stimulate circulation while loosening grime and dead skin. Once the body was warmed, attention turned to exfoliation, often achieved with a strigil, a curved metal or bronze instrument used to scrape away accumulated oil, sweat, and dirt. The strigil's use required precision, pressure, and patience. Each stroke revealed fresh, smooth skin beneath, and prepared the surface for subsequent treatments. Oils previously applied at home or brought to the baths would blend with this cleansing process, forming a thin, fragrant layer over the skin that both nourished and subtly signaled refinement to others who shared the space. Fragrances played a key role even within the steamy confines of the bath. Women would lightly dab or rub perfumes into their necks, wrists, and hair, enhancing the sensory experience of bathing. These scents, often derived from imported flowers, resins, and herbs, lingered on the skin long after the water was drained and the steam dissipated, creating an invisible yet intimate aura of care and sophistication. The baths were thus both practical and performative. They allowed women to cleanse and condition the body, while simultaneously demonstrating adherence to cultural standards of beauty and refinement. The communal nature of these spaces meant that subtle signals of status, wealth, and taste were continuously communicated, as polished skin, carefully applied oils, and fragrant scents became markers of discipline, attention, and social standing. In addition to the communal pools and strigils, bathhouses contained smaller, more private alcoves, where specific treatments could be applied. Women might access small basins of water, infused with herbs or ground minerals, used to soften the skin, lighten the complexion, or reduce blemishes. Oils were sometimes mixed with scented powders, then applied with gentle circular motions to the face, neck, and arms, a process that combined tactile pleasure with aesthetic intention. The repetition of these motions, the smooth resistance of the skin beneath the fingers, and the quiet rhythm of application created a meditative effect, where the act of grooming became intertwined with reflection and the subtle pleasures of touch and scent. The tools of the bath were varied and specialized. Brushes made from animal hair were used to stimulate the skin, remove dead cells, and distribute oils evenly. Small pumice stones or pieces of porous volcanic rock, sourced from nearby regions, softened rough areas on hands, feet, and elbows, maintaining the perception of delicate, cared-for skin. Mirrors, often polished metal discs rather than glass, allowed women to inspect their progress, ensuring that each treatment achieved the desired effect. Even the vessels themselves, bowls, jars, and containers, were chosen for both practicality and aesthetic appeal, often adorned with carvings or inscriptions, contributing to an overall experience in which beauty, function, and artfulness coexisted. Beyond physical treatment, the baths also reinforced patterns of social behavior and self-perception. Observing others, whether in the communal pools or moving between rooms, provided informal education on contemporary trends, hairstyles, and cosmetic techniques. Women could see the sheen of oils on skin, the precise arrangement of braids, the subtle application of powders, and learn from these examples. Conversation was often subdued but purposeful, revolving around personal care, recipes for creams, and advice on obtaining or using exotic ingredients. In this sense, the baths were a microcosm of Roman society itself, where appearance, status, and knowledge circulated alongside water and steam. The influence of seasonal change and climate was also evident in bathing rituals. In warmer months, baths provided relief from heat, while softening the skin for treatment. In cooler periods, the warmth of the caldarium was not only comforting but essential to preparing the body for oil and powder application. These adaptations demonstrate a practical awareness of the environment, where rituals evolved to suit both external conditions and the consistent cultural emphasis on appearance. The continuity of practice, regardless of circumstance, reinforced a rhythm in which care for the body was as habitual and expected as the rising sun or the sound of the city awakening. Through these daily excursions into the baths, Roman women participated in a continuum of beauty practice that was communal yet deeply personal. Each step, from immersion and exfoliation to the application of oils and scents, reflected an understanding that the body was both a canvas and a signal, shaped by culture, philosophy, and social expectation. The baths provided an environment where care could be practiced with precision, observed with discretion, and enjoyed as a sensory experience, all while maintaining the ideals of symmetry, softness, and refinement that defined Roman standards of beauty. The rhythms established in these spaces would influence subsequent treatments performed in private chambers, demonstrating that the foundation of Roman beauty was as much about consistent care and ritual as it was about rare ingredients or exotic practices. Thus, the bathhouses, with their pools, steam, and carefully arranged tools, were more than sites of cleansing. They were living laboratories of appearance, where the senses were engaged, the body was refined, and cultural ideals were enacted in every motion. As women emerged from these spaces, skin warm and supple, hair arranged and scented, they carried with them the quiet testimony of ritualized care, prepared to move into the wider city with an appearance that reflected both personal attention and societal expectation. It was within these spaces that the relationship between hygiene, beauty, and identity became most tangible. creating a foundation upon which the more exotic and unusual treatments of Roman life would later build. Emerging from the bathhouses, skin still warm from steaming pools and gentle exfoliation, Roman women turned their attention to a further layer of daily preparation: the careful application of cosmetic preparations, substances designed to enhance, alter, and preserve the appearance of the skin. These powders, creams, and pigments were crafted from a mixture of natural and sometimes unusual ingredients, each selected for its ability to whiten, smooth, color, or protect, and each reflecting centuries of observation, experimentation, and cultural preference. Within the context of Roman society, these substances were more than decorative. They were essential components in the ongoing negotiation between private care and public perception, between the body as a living canvas and the body as a signal of social position. Among the most common materials used were chalk and powdered minerals, substances that could be finely ground and applied to the face to achieve a smooth, pale complexion. Paleness, particularly for women of the elite, was considered a mark of refinement, a visible indicator that the individual was sheltered from outdoor labor and immersed in cultured leisure. The powders were applied delicately with soft brushes or cloths, building up a uniform layer that reflected light softly, smoothing imperfections and lending the skin an ethereal quality. The use of these substances required skill and patience, for too heavy an application could appear artificial, while too light a layer failed to convey the desired level of refinement. Lead-based cosmetics, while hazardous in ways not fully understood at the time, were also frequently employed, particularly in creams designed to lighten the skin. White lead, often mixed with oils or other binding agents, produced a strikingly pale effect and could be shaped into a smooth paste applied across the forehead, cheeks, and chin. In some cases, lead preparations were also used to reduce blemishes or conceal minor imperfections, demonstrating an early, if risky, understanding of chemical effects on the skin. Despite the potential health dangers, these substances remained highly prized, illustrating the priority given to appearance and the willingness of individuals to accept unseen risks in pursuit of societal ideals. For the eyes, the use of coal, finely ground antimony, soot, or other dark minerals was common, applied to the rims of the eyes to create definition, contrast, and a dramatic frame. Coal served both aesthetic and practical purposes. It emphasized the eyes in dimly lit interiors, highlighted expressions, and in some beliefs, was thought to offer a degree of protection against infections or the glare of the sun. The precise lines drawn along the eyelids, and sometimes extending beyond, required steady hands and careful observation, transforming the eyes into a focal point of both beauty and subtle power. Lip coloring was achieved using crushed minerals, plant-based dyes, and occasionally cinnabar, or red ochre, substances that created soft but noticeable tints along the lips. The application of color was careful and measured, intended to suggest vitality, health, and refinement without appearing ostentatious. For the cheeks, rouges derived from powdered ochre, berries, or other natural pigments were blended with oils to create a subtle flush that complemented the smooth pale canvas of the powdered face. Each preparation, whether for eyes, lips, or cheeks, involved a combination of tactile skill and aesthetic judgment, balancing color, texture, and harmony to achieve the desired visual effect. Beyond simple coloring, some creams and ointments were formulated to address perceived skin problems, such as dryness, blemishes, or uneven tone. Ingredients such as animal fats, honey, and various plant extracts were mixed into pastes or balms, each with its own properties, soothing, softening, or brightening the skin. These preparations reflect a sophisticated empirical knowledge. Romans observed the effects of different substances, combined them in varied proportions, and adapted their use according to season, skin type, and the desired result. Even though modern science would now recognize some combinations as harmful, the practices reveal an early and deliberate approach to skincare, linking observation, experimentation, and cultural ideal. The sourcing of these materials also tells a story of Roman trade, wealth, and cultural aspiration. Minerals might come from distant quarries, pigments from foreign lands, and plant extracts from far-flung provinces. Possession of rare ingredients became a quiet marker of status, signaling both access and taste. Wealthier households might maintain small stores of powdered minerals, essential oils, and exotic pigments, while more modest households relied on locally available substances, adapting recipes creatively to achieve similar effects. The cultural significance of these ingredients extended beyond their visual impact. They were symbols of connection, refinement, and the ongoing participation in a civilization that valued the artful presentation of the body as a reflection of inner order and social propriety. It is also notable that the act of applying these preparations was both meditative and performative. Brushes, fingers, and small spatulas were used with deliberate care, moving in long continuous motions across the face and neck. The repetition of touch, the blending of powder into oil, and the subtle layering of color created a rhythm that could be quieting, almost hypnotic, a way for individuals to center themselves while simultaneously preparing for the observation of others. In this sense, the cosmetic routines were not merely outward-facing. They engaged the senses, the mind, and the understanding of the self as part of a broader cultural continuum. At the same time, these preparations carried risks, which were often invisible to those who applied them. Lead-based creams, frequent exposure to crushed minerals, and the repeated layering of substances could damage skin, cause irritation, or even affect health over time. Yet the persistence of these practices illustrates the strength of cultural ideals and the intensity of social expectation. Beauty, in Roman terms, was a performance repeated daily, a disciplined attention to detail, and a negotiation with both natural and artificial forces. In choosing powders, pigments, and creams, women were participating in a centuries-long dialogue between tradition, experimentation, and aspiration. Each preparation, a note in the ongoing composition of identity and presentation. Through these carefully chosen and meticulously applied substances, the skin became more than flesh. It was a surface upon which culture, status, and aesthetics were inscribed. The powdered face, the subtly colored lips and cheeks, the defined eyes, all formed part of a language understood by observers and participants alike. Each preparation, each brush stroke, and each carefully measured ingredient contributed to a rhythm of care and performance that extended beyond the private chamber, influencing how a woman would be perceived in the forum, at the baths, and within her household. These rituals of cosmetic preparation were a delicate bridge between personal indulgence and social expectation, between empirical knowledge and cultural belief, between private sensation and public image. And so, emerging from the careful application of powders, creams, and pigments, women were transformed in ways that balanced artistry with expectation. The body, smoothed, scented, and subtly colored, reflected ideals of beauty that had been honed over centuries, preparing its wearer for the scrutiny and admiration of a society that valued harmony, symmetry, and the continuous cultivation of appearance. These practices, rooted in observation, trade, and social expectation, laid the groundwork for subsequent treatments, from hair care to perfumes, from specialized ointments to the more exotic rituals that would come to define Roman approaches to beauty. Following the careful layering of powders, creams, and pigments on their skin, Roman women turned their attention to the crowning element of personal appearance, the hair. Hair in ancient Rome was more than a biological feature. It was a complex symbol of social identity, a marker of status, and a visible expression of discipline, taste, and refinement. From the modest homes of ordinary citizens to the expansive villas of the elite, the treatments, styling, and adornment of hair occupied a central place in daily life. It was intertwined with societal expectations, aesthetic ideals, and the unspoken hierarchies that permeated Roman culture, making each coil, braid, or curl a statement of both personal and familial identity. The process of hair care began with the basics, washing and cleansing. Women used a variety of methods, often employing water mixed with mild alkaline substances, or infusions of herbs to remove accumulated oils, dust, and residues from cosmetics applied the day before. Soap as we know it was not widely available, but gentle combinations of ash, clay, and water could serve to cleanse the strands without causing excessive dryness. The hair, once washed, was carefully dried and combed, a practice that required patience and skill to detangle long or intricately arranged locks. The use of combs made from bone, wood, or occasionally ivory provided both practical utility and subtle aesthetic refinement, their teeth spaced to accommodate the varying textures of hair and to avoid breakage. For Roman matrons and elite women, the preparation of hair was often an elaborate ritual, reflecting both personal discipline and social ambition. Hair was styled in ways that could signify marital status, age, and rank within society. Simple styles such as loose waves or modest braids were common among younger or less wealthy women, conveying elegance without ostentation. In contrast, more complex arrangements, featuring multiple braids, coiled chignons, and layered waves, were popular among the elite, particularly matrons whose appearance was expected to embody dignity, sophistication, and refinement. These intricate hairdos often required hours of preparation and the assistance of skilled attendants, whose expertise ensured symmetry, stability, and subtlety in the final presentation. Coloring the hair was another significant aspect of Roman beauty practices. Blonde and light-colored hair were particularly fashionable, a preference influenced by cultural admiration for the appearance of Northern Europeans and by artistic depictions in sculpture and frescoes. Women achieved these shades using a combination of natural dyes, such as saffron, chamomile, and other botanical agents, applied in repeated treatments to lighten the hair gradually. Darker shades were maintained or intensified with plant-based pigments and oils, creating a controlled contrast that highlighted the contours of the face and the careful arrangement of curls or braids. Hair dyeing was not merely aesthetic, it communicated social knowledge, access to trade goods, and familiarity with contemporary trends, further linking the hair to the broader visual vocabulary of status and identity. Wigs, or capelli, were also a feature of Roman hair culture, particularly among wealthy women who sought both convenience and the ability to achieve complex styles that might be difficult to maintain with natural hair alone. These wigs were often crafted from human hair imported from various provinces of the empire, dyed, curled, and arranged to match prevailing fashions. They could be added to natural hair, layered to increase volume, or entirely replace the wearer's own hair for ceremonial occasions. The use of wigs demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of appearance management, a willingness to incorporate foreign materials, and an appreciation for the performative dimension of beauty. The addition of hairpieces could transform a woman's overall presentation, signaling her social position and her engagement with elite standards of refinement. Accessories further enhanced Roman hairstyles, serving both decorative and functional purposes. Pins, combs, ribbons, and fillets were strategically placed to secure complex arrangements, while providing subtle ornamentation. Materials ranged from simple bone and wood to precious metals and gemstones for the wealthiest women. The placement of these items was carefully considered, reinforcing the overall symmetry of the style and aligning with aesthetic principles inherited from Greek and earlier Italic traditions. Each accessory, like the folds of a gown or the sheen of applied oils, contributed to a holistic impression of elegance and poise. The labor and attention invested in hair care also reflected the broader rhythms of Roman society. Just as bathing and cosmetic preparation followed specific sequences, hair treatment adhered to schedules that considered daily activities, religious observances, and social engagements. Women might restyle hair in the morning after bathing, refresh arrangements midday for public appearances, and remove or adjust styles in the evening to maintain comfort and hygiene. This cycle illustrates how beauty routines were interwoven with daily life, shaping both time and behavior, and how the cultivation of hair was simultaneously a private pleasure and a public obligation. Moreover, hair was intimately connected to notions of identity, virtue, and morality. Writings from Roman philosophers and poets often link a well-kept appearance to discipline, self-control, and an ordered mind. Conversely, neglected or disorderly hair could suggest impropriety or lack of care, signaling to observers a deviation from expected conduct. The careful arrangement, coloring, and embellishment of hair thus became an embodied expression of cultural values, a language of visual cues through which women communicated both adherence to societal norms and their own engagement with the ideals of beauty. Through these meticulous rituals, hair emerged not merely as a biological feature, but as a dynamic medium of cultural expression. Each stroke of the comb, Each coil or twist, each carefully applied dye or accessory contributed to a living artwork, shaped by both empirical knowledge of materials and aesthetic sensitivity. The hair, like the powdered skin beneath it, was a canvas upon which identity, aspiration, and social understanding were inscribed, a visible manifestation of a civilization that equated meticulous care with virtue, and beauty with both personal and civic virtue. Thus, as Roman women completed the final adjustments to their hairstyles, they stepped into the broader world not only cleansed and scented, but framed and defined by their hair. Each strand, curl, and ornament reflected hours of attention, centuries of accumulated cultural knowledge, and an ongoing dialogue between personal preference and societal expectation. These routines, linking daily care to philosophical ideals and public perception, prepared women for the multifaceted performance of life in Rome, where appearance was continuously observed, interpreted, and at times judged. In this way, the artistry of hair became inseparable from the broader rituals of beauty, setting the stage for subsequent treatments, adornments, and even the peculiar practices that would continue to shape the Roman pursuit of perfection. Once the intricate rituals of hair care were complete, Roman women turned to one of the most subtle yet pervasive aspects of personal grooming, the application of perfumes and fragrant oils. In the culture of Rome, scent was not merely a decorative accessory, it was an extension of identity, a marker of refinement, and an invisible but highly legible layer of communication. The careful selection, preparation, and application of perfumes formed a continuum of practices that linked personal hygiene, aesthetic sensibility, social signaling, and even religious observance. In every chamber, villa, and bathhouse, the aroma of oils and flowers permeated spaces, creating a sensory backdrop to the daily life of Roman women, whose appearance was considered incomplete without the nuanced presence of scent. Perfumes in Rome were sourced both locally and from the far reaches of the empire. Oils infused with fragrant herbs, flowers, and resins were combined in meticulous recipes designed to produce complex and long-lasting aromas. Olive oil, used widely as a base, carried scents extracted from roses, lilies, myrtle, and violets, each chosen for its symbolic and olfactory properties. Resins like frankincense and myrrh, imported from the eastern provinces, were prized for their rarity, their complex fragrance, and the social prestige they conferred upon those who could afford them. Cinnamon, cassia, and other exotic spices sometimes featured in these mixtures, creating perfumes that were both intoxicating and carefully calibrated to communicate taste, wealth, and cultural awareness. The preparation of perfumes required both technical knowledge and a delicate sensibility. Oils were warmed gently to encourage absorption of the aromatic compounds, a process conducted slowly to preserve the integrity of fragile floral essences. Ingredients were ground, blended, and sometimes aged to achieve a balance of top, middle, and base notes, mirroring, in a rudimentary way, principles later formalized in modern perfumery. Small quantities were measured with care, combined in vessels designed to allow subtle aeration, and stored in containers that preserved both scent and color. The meticulous craftsmanship involved underscores that perfume was a form of art in itself, one that demanded patience, observation, and a deep understanding of the properties of each material. Application was an intimate and deliberate ritual. Perfumed oils were often warmed slightly between the hands before being rubbed onto the skin in long, gentle strokes. The nape of the neck, the wrists, and behind the ears were favored locations, areas where blood vessels lay close to the surface and heat helped the fragrance linger. Hair, particularly after careful styling, might be lightly scented, integrating the aroma with the visual presentation achieved through combing, braiding, or adornment. The act of applying perfume was not rushed. It required time and attention, reinforcing the sense that the body was an ongoing project of refinement, where every visible and invisible surface could be enhanced. Socially, the use of fragrance served multiple functions. In private, perfumes were markers of personal hygiene and self-care, signaling that a woman had devoted effort and attention to her body. In public, subtle scents communicated sophistication, refinement, and status, signaling access to imported goods, knowledge of contemporary trends, and alignment with cultural ideals. A well-chosen perfume could elevate a matron's presence at a gathering, create an impression of understated elegance, or distinguish her from others in subtle but meaningful ways. The power of scent lay in its intimacy and persistence, invisible yet pervasive. It could shape perception without a word being spoken, merging personal indulgence with social influence. Perfumes also held ritual and symbolic significance. In religious observances, oils and aromatic substances were offered to deities, applied to the body as a form of purification, or used to anoint sacred spaces. The connection between the use of fragrances in daily life and in ritual contexts blurred the boundaries between aesthetic, hygienic, and spiritual practices. The act of scenting the body could thus be experienced as both a personal pleasure and a culturally sanctioned expression of order, devotion, and propriety. Even within the private sphere, the awareness that fragrances carried symbolic resonance added layers of meaning to what might otherwise be considered a purely sensory indulgence. In addition to the aromatic appeal, many perfumes contained practical elements intended to preserve the skin and hair, reflecting empirical knowledge passed down over generations. Oils and scented balms could soften the epidermis, protect against drying from sun or wind, and complement other cosmetic preparations. Some combinations incorporated subtle antiseptic or soothing properties derived from herbs and resins, providing functional benefits alongside aesthetic effects. In this sense, fragrance was inseparable from the broader system of care that encompassed bathing, skin preparation, hair styling, and makeup, forming a coherent routine in which each element reinforced and enhanced the others. The experience of scent in Roman life was thus multidimensional. It existed as an art, a statement of refinement, a practical tool for personal maintenance, and a subtle language of social communication. The careful layering of oils, the selection of rare ingredients, and the precision of application all contributed to an immersive sensory experience that surrounded the individual, shaping both self-perception and the perception of others. Fragrances were an invisible but pervasive medium, through which identity, taste, and social knowledge were expressed, linking private indulgence with public expectation in a continuous and harmonious flow. Ultimately, the use of perfumes and fragrant oils exemplifies the Roman approach to beauty as a holistic practice, one that engaged the body, the senses, and social awareness simultaneously. Just as powders, creams, and hair care routines prepared the body to meet societal ideals, perfumes extended this preparation into the realm of scent, creating an enduring impression that lingered beyond the immediate visual field. The combination of texture, color, scent, and arrangement transformed daily care into a layered, ritualized performance, in which every motion, gesture, and application contributed to a broader aesthetic, social, and cultural narrative. In this way, the fragrant oils and perfumes of Rome were more than embellishments. They were tools of cultivation, markers of status, and subtle extensions of personal identity. The careful integration of these scents into daily life allowed Roman women to navigate a complex social landscape with grace, tact, and refinement, ensuring that their presence, seen, touched, and smelled, reflected the ideals of beauty, elegance, and cultural sophistication that underpinned the civilization itself. After the careful application of perfumes and fragrant oils, Roman women turned their attention to the final visible layer of personal adornment: makeup. In the culture of ancient Rome, makeup was not merely an embellishment, it was a nuanced language through which social position, personal taste, and adherence to cultural ideals were communicated. Each sweep of color, every carefully applied stain, and the subtle blending of pigments were gestures embedded in tradition, observation, and empirical experimentation, all contributing to a carefully constructed visual persona that extended the effects of previous grooming rituals. The process of applying makeup formed a quiet, methodical rhythm, a continuation of the meditative engagement with the body that began in the baths, passed through hair care, and lingered in the fragrant traces of scented oils. Among the most pervasive practices was the use of rouge, applied to the cheeks to create the appearance of vitality, health, and youth. This coloration was often achieved with powdered ochre, ground berries, or mineral pigments, sometimes blended with oils or animal fats to allow for smooth, even application. The effect was subtle yet deliberate, intended to enhance the natural contours of the face without appearing exaggerated. The placement of rouge required careful observation, as improper application could disrupt the harmony of the face, drawing attention to imperfections or suggesting artificiality. The gentle blending of pigment into the skin created a soft flowing gradient, producing the illusion of natural flush, while subtly signaling refinement, attention, and conformity to contemporary aesthetic ideals. Lip coloration was similarly nuanced. Crushed minerals, plant-based dyes, or powdered cinnabar were used to tint the lips, imparting a delicate but noticeable hue. Red and pink tones were preferred, symbolizing health, vitality, and sometimes social availability. In the subtle semiotics of appearance, application was precise and measured, often requiring small brushes or the careful use of fingers to distribute pigment evenly. The lips, framed by powdered skin and complemented by rouged cheeks, became a focal point of expression, their color softening or accentuating features in ways that harmonized with hair arrangements, eye definition, and the invisible presence of fragrance. Eyes were framed and emphasized with dark pigments, often referred to as kohl or similar mineral-based substances, applied along the rims and sometimes extended into subtle lines that followed the curve of the eyelid. These treatments enhanced the expressiveness of the eyes, creating depth, contrast, and focus. In addition to aesthetic considerations, darkened eyes carried cultural and symbolic weight. They conveyed attentiveness, allure, and a degree of controlled power within a visual vocabulary, understood by observers across social strata. The careful alignment of dark pigment with the natural lines of the eye exemplifies the meticulous nature of Roman makeup, where every stroke of color was both decorative and meaningful. The choice of color extended beyond simple enhancement, entering the realm of symbolic communication. Pale skin, achieved through powders and creams, signified leisure, status, and refinement, while red lips and cheeks suggested health, vitality, and social presence. Darkened eyes could evoke both attention and subtle authority, reinforcing the status of women who had mastered the complex interplay between observation, adornment, and cultural expectation. The combination of these elements, powdered skin, rouged cheeks, tinted lips, and defined eyes, created a cohesive, legible appearance that simultaneously reflected individual taste and broader social norms. Application methods were deliberate and precise. Small brushes, often made from animal hair, allowed for controlled deposition of pigment, while soft cloths or fingertips enabled gentle blending. Repetition, rhythm, and careful observation were essential to achieving balance and subtlety. The process itself could be calming and contemplative, a continuation of the meditative practices established in bathing, hair care, and fragrance application. Each gesture reinforced a sense of order, refinement, and control over the body, extending the physical transformations achieved in previous stages of grooming into a visible, socially legible form. These makeup practices were not uniform across all social classes. Wealthier women, with access to imported minerals, exotic dyes, and skilled attendants, could achieve a higher degree of subtlety, variation, and permanence in their makeup. Women of more modest means relied on locally available pigments, botanical extracts, and simple oils, producing results that were effective but less elaborate. Despite these differences, the principles of balance, enhancement, and social signaling remained consistent, demonstrating the pervasive influence of cultural ideals on daily grooming practices across the empire. The application of makeup also interacted with other beauty rituals. The powdered skin beneath provided a smooth canvas for pigment. The oils and fragrances carried on the skin influenced how colors appeared and lingered, and the carefully styled hair framed and complemented the overall effect. These interconnected layers formed a holistic system in which each element reinforced the others, producing a cohesive and harmonious presentation. Makeup was not an isolated practice but part of a continuum of grooming, care, and cultural expression that extended from private chambers into public spaces, reflecting both personal diligence and adherence to societal expectations. In essence, makeup in ancient Rome was a dialogue between body, culture, and perception. Each color, placement, and application method carried layers of meaning, shaping how individuals were viewed and how they experienced themselves. The careful construction of appearance through pigments, powders, and dyes represented an ongoing engagement with social norms, aesthetic ideals, and practical knowledge, ensuring that the body became both a canvas and a medium through which identity, refinement, and social understanding were continuously enacted. Through the meditative and meticulous application of these colors, women concluded a sequence of daily rituals that had begun in the baths, continued through hair care, and expanded into scent and adornment. The body, now polished, scented, coiffed, and colored, emerged as a fully articulated expression of Roman ideals of beauty, discipline, and social presence. Each visible detail, the rosy cheeks, the tinted lips, the defined eyes, reinforced the broader cultural narrative in which appearance, perception, and expectation were inseparable. In this way, makeup was both an end and a continuation, linking the tactile and olfactory pleasures of earlier routines to the visual language of refinement that would carry the day, frame interactions, and communicate social awareness. While the careful attention to skin, hair, scent, and cosmetics transformed the visible aspects of a Roman woman's appearance, the treatment of the mouth and teeth represented another crucial layer of personal grooming. In Roman culture, the mouth was simultaneously functional and aesthetic, a site where hygiene, social expectation, and beauty ideals intersected. The appearance of the teeth could signal health, refinement, and attention to personal care, and methods for maintaining oral cleanliness were developed with both practical and aesthetic concerns in mind. These practices, often subtle and continuous, contributed to the broader performance of beauty that began in bathing chambers and extended across hair, skin, fragrance, and makeup. Roman dental hygiene, though rudimentary by modern standards, relied on a combination of mechanical cleaning, natural abrasives, and occasional chemical interventions. Brushes were uncommon, but tools such as chew sticks, small wooden implements, and frayed twigs were used to remove debris from between teeth. These tools, combined with powders, made from crushed shells, bones, or fine stones, helped to polish the teeth and reduce surface accumulation. Women, particularly those of higher social standing, might also employ rinses prepared from water, wine, or vinegar, occasionally infused with herbs such as mint, rue, or myrtle, which offered both cleansing properties and a pleasant aroma. The use of these rinses reflects an awareness of both the practical and aesthetic dimensions of oral care, linking sensory experience to visual effect. Teeth whitening was a significant concern in Roman culture, where pale, clean teeth were associated with vitality, refinement, and social awareness. Various substances, from powdered charcoal to mixtures of vinegar and pumice, were applied to the teeth to remove stains and produce a brighter appearance. While modern science recognizes the potential abrasiveness or acidity of some of these methods, their use demonstrates a keen interest in appearance management and an empirical understanding of material effects on the body. Women may have devoted a portion of their grooming rituals to the careful polishing and whitening of teeth, integrating these practices into the broader sequence that began in the bath, passed through hair and makeup, and extended to the mouth and hands. The oral cavity also played a role in the subtleties of social signaling. A pleasant smile, showing well cared for teeth, conveyed health, attentiveness, and a degree of cultural literacy. Conversely, neglect of dental appearance could suggest disorder, illness, or insufficient attention to the social obligations of personal care. In a society deeply attentive to visual and sensory cues, the mouth became a site where the private labor of grooming was translated into public perception, where the effects of ritualized care could influence interactions, impressions, and social standing. Beyond appearance, certain substances used for the mouth care may have provided antiseptic or soothing effects. Infusions of herbs such as mint or rue, vinegar rinses, and the abrasive action of fine powders contributed to oral hygiene in ways that went beyond aesthetic enhancement, reflecting an empirical knowledge of natural materials and their effects. The integration of these practices into daily routines illustrates the Romans' holistic approach to beauty, in which functionality, sensory experience, and visual presentation were closely intertwined. In addition, the mouth was linked to other forms of beauty and self-presentation. Scented breath, the result of careful oral cleaning, and the use of aromatic rinses, harmonized with perfumes applied to the skin and hair, creating a coherent sensory presence. The alignment of these olfactory, visual, and tactile elements reinforced the impression of refinement and meticulous self-care. Oral aesthetics, therefore, were not isolated. They participated in a network of grooming rituals that collectively shaped appearance, perception, and social identity. The care given to the teeth and mouth also reflected broader societal ideals. Clean, pale teeth were associated with leisure, access to resources, and the ability to engage in social rituals without the distraction of physical imperfection. These ideals were communicated not only through direct observation, but also through literature, art, and philosophy, which frequently linked appearance with moral and social qualities. The process of oral care, like other grooming rituals, was a disciplined practice in which attention, patience, and knowledge were deployed to align the body with prevailing cultural expectations. Ultimately, dental care and mouth grooming in ancient Rome exemplify the interconnectedness of functionality and aesthetics. The teeth, lips, and breath were simultaneously practical and symbolic, requiring consistent attention, empirical experimentation, and careful ritual. Their maintenance was a continuation of a larger sequence of beauty practices that included bathing, skin preparation, hair care, fragrance, and makeup, each layer enhancing the others to produce a coherent and socially legible presentation. Through the deliberate attention to oral appearance, Roman women extended the reach of their beauty rituals to encompass every visible and perceivable aspect of the body. The subtle whiteness of the teeth, the softness of the lips, and the freshness of the breath were all components of a carefully managed aesthetic, one that harmonized with the visual, tactile, and olfactory dimensions of the self. This integration demonstrates that in Rome, beauty was never incidental. It was cultivated, layered, and continuous, an ongoing dialogue between the body, the senses, and the cultural framework in which identity, status, and refinement were understood. Beyond the imported minerals, herbs, and fragrant oils that formed the backbone of Roman beauty routines, some of the most curious and striking practices involved the use of unusual animal products. These ingredients, often sourced from both local and exotic fauna, were believed to possess restorative, softening, or beautifying properties that complemented more conventional treatments. Among them, substances such as snail slime, crocodile fat, and various other secretions and rendered fats occupied a peculiar place within the Roman cosmetic repertoire, revealing both a fascination with experimentation and a willingness to integrate the natural world into the intimate rituals of self-care. Snail slime, for example, was prized for its supposed capacity to soften and rejuvenate the skin. Collected from the mucus of live snails, this viscous substance was blended into creams or applied directly to the face in small quantities. It was thought to soothe irritation, improve elasticity, and impart a subtle sheen, effects that aligned with broader ideals of luminous, youthful skin. The tactile nature of this application, a cool, sticky film gently massaged into the epidermis, created a slow, deliberate process that was both meditative and intimately connected with the materiality of the natural world. Roman women who used snail-based preparations did so with care, aware that these unusual substances required patience, repeated application, and delicate handling to achieve the desired aesthetic effect. Crocodile fat represented another striking example of animal-derived cosmetic innovation. Imported from regions where these reptiles were found, the fat was rendered and incorporated into ointments and balms. Its dense emollient qualities made it ideal for moisturizing dry skin, particularly in arid climates or during periods of harsh weather. Beyond its physical properties, the exotic origin of crocodile fat conveyed cultural sophistication, as it required access to trade networks extending across the empire and knowledge of preparation techniques that could render the substance safe and effective. Its use therefore communicated both practical and social significance, intertwining aesthetic outcomes with the performative aspects of refinement and worldly awareness. Other animal-derived substances included the rendered fats of goats, pigs, and birds, often infused with fragrant herbs or resins to enhance both scent and texture. Beeswax, a locally available product, was frequently incorporated into creams and pomades to provide consistency, adherence, and subtle protective qualities. These ingredients, while more familiar than snail slime or crocodile fat, shared the same underlying principle. the harnessing of natural substances sometimes transformed through careful preparation to serve the dual goals of cosmetic enhancement and sensory pleasure. The incorporation of animal products into beauty routines also intersected with symbolic and ritual dimensions. Certain ingredients were associated with vitality, fertility, or strength, and their use could imply the transference of these qualities to the body. By applying these unusual substances, Roman women engaged in a complex dialogue between empirical observation, cultural belief, and aesthetic aspiration. The body became a laboratory in which the properties of diverse creatures were carefully tested, refined, and integrated into a carefully calibrated system of care. Application methods for these materials were both practical and ritualized. Creams and balms were often warmed gently to enhance spreadability, massaged slowly into the skin or hair, and left to absorb over extended periods. The tactile experience, cool, sticky, smooth, or dense, reinforced a meditative rhythm, linking attention to detail with bodily awareness. This sensory engagement, combined with the visual and olfactory effects of accompanying ingredients, created an immersive process in which each step of grooming was experienced fully and deliberately. Socially, the use of these exotic or unusual substances reinforced distinctions of class, access, and sophistication. While more modest households might rely on local herbs, oils, and mineral powders, wealthier women could acquire rare animal products from distant provinces, integrating them into a complex palette of beauty rituals. These practices communicated both refinement and connection to expansive trade networks, linking personal care to the wider economic and cultural dimensions of the empire. The use of such materials also aligned with Roman ideas of experimentation and observation, illustrating a society attentive to both the empirical properties of substances and their broader symbolic resonances. The layering of treatments, soothing creams, aromatic oils, powdered pigments, and exotic balms demonstrates the holistic nature of Roman beauty practices. Each ingredient, no matter how unusual, was integrated into a carefully orchestrated sequence, reinforcing prior treatments and preparing the body for subsequent ones. Snail slime could soften the skin beneath powdered pigments. Crocodile fat could provide a protective layer that complemented scented oils. Beeswax could stabilize both color and texture. The cumulative effect was a coherent and multi-dimensional approach to appearance, in which every sensory channel, touch, sight, smell, was engaged, harmonized, and refined. Ultimately, the use of unusual animal products underscores the lengths to which Romans went in pursuit of beauty, reflecting a cultural ethos that valued experimentation, patience, and meticulous attention to material properties. The body was a canvas for both conventional and extraordinary treatments, a site where empirical knowledge, aesthetic ambition, and symbolic meaning converged. In embracing these unconventional ingredients, Roman women extended the boundaries of their daily rituals, weaving together practicality, indulgence, and sophistication into a continuous immersive experience of self-care. Through these practices, beauty became an expansive tactile and sensory endeavor, where even the most unexpected substances contributed to an overarching ideal of refinement, vitality, and social presence. The application of snail slime, crocodile fat, and other animal-derived materials was not simply about surface appearance. It represented the integration of nature, artifice, and culture into a seamless daily performance, in which every layer of care enhanced the next and carried forward the carefully cultivated ideals of Roman civilization. As the Roman pursuit of beauty became increasingly sophisticated, the intersection between medical knowledge and cosmetic practice grew more pronounced. The care of the body, once thought of primarily in aesthetic or ritual terms, was also informed by the insights of physicians and apothecaries, whose understanding of the human body, natural substances, and the effects of various treatments provided a scientific framework for beauty practices. In Rome, the lines between health, hygiene, and appearance were permeable, and women often consulted experts not only to address ailments, but to ensure that their grooming regimens enhanced both their vitality and their visible refinement. Physicians, trained in the theory of humors and the observation of bodily signs, were sometimes approached by women seeking guidance on how diet, skincare, and topical treatments could influence the complexion, hair, and general appearance. They would recommend balms, oils, and powders with specific properties, such as soothing inflamed skin, reducing dryness, or improving circulation. These prescriptions were grounded in empirical observation. Certain herbs and minerals were recognized to have measurable effects on texture, color, or elasticity of the skin. While modern science may question some of the efficacy of these interventions, their integration into daily beauty routines demonstrates that Roman women did not view health and appearance as separate spheres, but as interconnected dimensions of a cultivated life. Apothecaries, specialized practitioners of preparation and dispensing, played an equally central role. These artisans produced creams, ointments, and powders, according to both medical and cosmetic recipes, blending natural ingredients to achieve desired effects. Their shops were repositories of knowledge about plant extracts, minerals, animal products, and aromatic compounds, and they provided guidance on proper preparation, storage, and application. Women of the elite classes, in particular, would seek the expertise of apothecaries to obtain rare or complex mixtures, ensuring that the substances used in their daily routines were effective, safe, and aligned with contemporary standards of refinement. Consultation with medical professionals also reflected the cultural belief that beauty could signify inner balance and health. A clear complexion, lustrous hair, and supple skin were interpreted as outward manifestations of proper bodily equilibrium, moderated by diet, exercise, and treatment regimens. Physicians would sometimes recommend adjustments in food and lifestyle to support cosmetic goals. Certain foods were believed to promote radiance, while excessive indulgences might dull the skin or reduce vitality. These recommendations were integrated into the daily life of women, complementing bathing, perfuming, makeup, and hair care practices, creating a multi-layered system in which aesthetic and functional considerations were inseparable. The advice of physicians could also extend to the use of more unusual or potent ingredients. Knowledge of dosage, preparation, and combination was essential when applying substances such as lead-based powders, resins, or animal fats. The consultation ensured that such treatments, while effective in achieving desired visual effects, did not cause harm or imbalance, demonstrating a careful negotiation between risk, reward, and the pursuit of beauty. Apothecaries, guided by both medical knowledge and artisanal skill, provided further support in this endeavor, refining mixtures, ensuring stability, and customizing preparations according to individual needs and preferences. These interactions highlight the social and economic dimensions of Roman beauty practices. Access to physicians and skilled apothecaries signaled status, wealth, and cultural sophistication, reinforcing the role of appearance as a marker of societal position. Women who could consult experts and acquire rare ingredients not only enhanced their visual presence, but also participated in a broader cultural network in which knowledge, trade, and refinement intersected. The deliberate incorporation of medical and artisanal expertise into grooming routines reflects a nuanced understanding that beauty was not merely cosmetic, but an ongoing managed process informed by observation, tradition, and experimentation. Moreover, the involvement of physicians and apothecaries underscores the holistic nature of Roman aesthetics. Every aspect of grooming, cleansing, hair care, fragrance, makeup, and the use of exotic ingredients was informed by knowledge of the body's response to substances, the properties of materials, and the rhythms of daily life. Consulting experts allowed women to refine their routines, anticipate effects, and maintain consistency in appearance. In this way, personal beauty was not left to chance. It was a disciplined practice, combining empirical insight, tactile engagement, and cultural awareness. The practices recommended by physicians often carried both functional and symbolic weight. Treatments aimed at softening skin, reducing blemishes, or enhancing hair texture could convey health, discipline, and attentiveness, while adherence to expert advice demonstrated social literacy, sophistication, and access to cultural capital. The integration of professional guidance into daily routines illustrates that Roman beauty was deeply intertwined with broader systems of knowledge and authority, linking the individual to networks of expertise, commerce, and social expectation. Ultimately, the role of physicians and apothecaries in Roman beauty practices demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the body as a site where health, aesthetics, and cultural ideals intersect. The advice, prescriptions and mixtures provided by these experts enhanced the layered rituals of daily grooming, ensuring that the skin, hair, and overall presentation of women aligned with prevailing standards of refinement and elegance. Beauty in this context was not superficial but disciplined, cumulative, and informed by observation, skill, and a nuanced appreciation for the interplay between material, body, and society. Through the guidance of medical and artisanal authorities, the pursuit of beauty in ancient Rome became a carefully managed, intentional process, in which each gesture, each ingredient, and each application contributed to a cohesive, multi-dimensional expression of identity, social standing, and cultural knowledge. The collaboration between women, physicians, and apothecaries ensured that grooming routines were not only aesthetically effective, but embedded within the broader framework of health, skill, and societal expectation, producing a deeply integrated, layered, and enduring tradition of personal care. As Roman women refined their appearance through baths, perfumes, makeup, and the guidance of physicians and apothecaries, another, more intangible layer of beauty practices persisted quietly alongside these physical routines. The intersection of magic, superstition, and ritual, in a society deeply attuned to both the seen and unseen dimensions of existence, beauty was understood not only as a matter of appearance, skill, and material preparation, but also as a conduit for spiritual influence, charm, and social connection. Across the city, from private chambers to temple precincts, women incorporated spells, charms, and ritualized gestures into their grooming, linking bodily care with beliefs about love, attraction, and divine favor. The use of magical or ritualistic elements in beauty routines often began with ingredients imbued with symbolic resonance. Certain herbs, oils, and powders were thought to possess intrinsic powers that could enhance attractiveness, influence the perceptions of others, or safeguard the practitioner from envy or malevolent spirits. Rose petals, myrtle, and other fragrant plants were occasionally combined with spoken incantations or gestures to augment their effects, creating a layered, multi-sensory experience in which scent, touch, and intent intertwined. These rituals were not necessarily dramatic. They were slow, contemplative, and quietly integrated into the flow of daily care, becoming habitual components of the larger sequence of bathing, scenting, hairstyling, and makeup application. Charms, amulets, and small tokens sometimes accompanied cosmetic practices, worn on the body, or kept nearby during grooming. These objects, crafted from metals, stones, or bone, carried inscriptions, images, or symbols intended to attract desire, protect beauty, or encourage social favor. A woman might hold an amulet while applying lipstick, or rub a ring along her hair to ensure both its sheen and its charm. These practices reflected the belief that the body, appearance, and personal aura were connected to broader currents of fortune, influence, and unseen energies, and that careful attention to these elements could magnify the effectiveness of visible beauty routines. Spells were often recited in conjunction with the preparation or application of cosmetics. A simple whisper as oils were massaged into the skin or pigments applied to the cheeks and lips could transform a routine gesture into a ritual act, suffusing everyday actions with intent and spiritual significance. The repetition of words, gestures, or incantations created rhythm and focus, aligning the body, mind, and environment in a deliberate process intended to harmonize appearance with desired social or emotional outcomes. The very slow, meditative nature of these practices mirrored and reinforced the pacing of physical grooming, in which patience, care, and observation were central to efficacy. Superstition also extended to the timing and circumstances of beauty rituals. Certain phases of the moon, specific days, or particular hours were thought to enhance the effects of cosmetic treatments. A carefully prepared ointment might be applied at dawn to maximize its influence, or a charm worn during a bath at dusk to ensure lasting protection against ill will. These practices underscore that Roman women experienced beauty as a complex interplay between material manipulation, temporal awareness, and spiritual engagement, creating a multi-layered continuum in which the seen and unseen coexisted seamlessly. Magic and superstition were also intertwined with concepts of attraction and love. Some rituals were specifically aimed at influencing romantic or social interactions, enhancing allure, or fostering favorable impressions among potential suitors. The preparation of a fragrant oil might be accompanied by a spell to attract admiration, or the application of a colored powder could be linked to charms believed to increase desirability. These practices reveal an understanding of beauty as both a personal endeavor and a social instrument, in which appearance, presence, and subtle energetic influence worked in tandem. Even when these rituals seem foreign or unusual to modern sensibilities, they were consistent with the broader Roman worldview, in which the natural and supernatural were intimately connected. The careful layering of spells, charms, and ritualized gestures onto existing grooming practices illustrates the holistic approach to personal care. The body was treated, adorned, and scented, while simultaneously being aligned with beliefs, intentions, and social strategies. The combination of physical preparation and spiritual augmentation ensured that beauty was experienced as a complete, immersive process, engaging not only sight and touch but also consciousness and belief. The integration of magical and superstitious practices into daily routines also underscores the cognitive and cultural sophistication of Roman women. They managed complex sequences of grooming, understood the properties and interactions of materials, and engaged in ritualized actions that required concentration, timing, and intent. This careful orchestration of body, mind, and spirit demonstrates that beauty was conceived as a comprehensive, multidimensional endeavor, in which every layer, physical, aromatic, chromatic, tactile, and spiritual, reinforced the others. In this sense, the presence of magic and superstition in Roman cosmetic practices reveals a broader understanding of beauty as inseparable from social and spiritual life. Appearance was not merely a matter of surface or personal vanity, but a medium through which identity, intention, and cultural literacy were expressed. Each ritual gesture, each charm, and each whispered incantation contributed to a continuous process in which the visible, the tangible, and the unseen coalesced, producing a form of beauty that was deeply experiential, socially legible, and culturally resonant. Through the subtle integration of spells, charms, and ritualized gestures, Roman women transformed ordinary grooming into a layered, contemplative, and intentional practice. The body became both canvas and conduit, mediating between aesthetic ideals, social perception, and spiritual alignment. In this way, beauty was never isolated from the wider currents of Roman belief and daily life. It was a sustained engagement with materiality, intention, and symbolism, a continuous flow in which appearance and meaning were inseparably entwined, guiding every movement of the hand, every stroke of pigment, and every inhalation of fragrant oils. Alongside the careful preparation of creams, powders, perfumes, and ritualistic gestures, Roman women relied on an array of tools and accessories to apply, refine, and maintain their beauty. These implements, ranging from delicate brushes and mirrors to tweezers and small containers, were not merely functional, they were objects of craftsmanship, attention, and care, forming an indispensable part of the daily rhythm of personal grooming. The presence and quality of these tools also reflected social standing, access to skilled artisans, and a meticulous approach to the embodiment of aesthetic ideals. Brushes, for example, were crafted from fine animal hairs, sometimes affixed to handles of wood, ivory, or bone, carefully shaped to allow precise control over powders, creams, and pigments. The texture of the bristles, their flexibility and density, influenced the distribution of color, the smoothness of application, and the subtlety of blending. A well-made brush could transform a routine application of rouge into a seamless enhancement of natural contours, while a worn or coarse tool could create uneven results. The care and storage of brushes were therefore integral. They were cleaned gently, often with water, oils, or fine cloths, and kept in cases or boxes to prevent damage, ensuring that each application was both effective and refined. Mirrors likewise were prized objects, varying in material, size, and reflectivity. Polished metal mirrors, often of bronze or silver, were common, offering a reflective surface that allowed precise attention to detail. Glass mirrors, rarer and more expensive, were sometimes available to elite households, providing clearer, more accurate reflections. The act of observing oneself in a mirror was deliberate and contemplative, enabling women to align the various layers of their beauty rituals: the smoothness of powdered skin, the placement of rouge, the arrangement of hair, and the application of eye pigments. In this way, mirrors served as instruments not only of visual confirmation, but also of introspection and careful adjustment, allowing each element of appearance to be harmonized with the others. Tweezers, made from metals such as bronze or iron, played a subtle but essential role. They were used for plucking unwanted hair, shaping eyebrows, or maintaining the precise lines necessary for aesthetic harmony. Their careful use demanded patience and attention, reinforcing the meditative quality of grooming. Small containers and boxes, often made of wood, bone or ceramic, stored powders, ointments, and small implements, protecting them from contamination, loss or degradation. The organization of these accessories reflected the careful planning inherent in Roman beauty routines, in which every tool had its place, and every substance its purpose. The craftsmanship of these instruments further emphasized their cultural and aesthetic significance. Handles might be engraved with patterns, inlaid with small gems, or polished to a subtle sheen, transforming utilitarian objects into delicate works of art. The tactile qualities of each implement, the smoothness of a mirror, the resilience of a brush, the cool touch of a metal tweezer, enhanced the sensory experience of grooming, making the act of preparation itself a layered immersive ritual. The slow, deliberate handling of these tools reinforced a rhythm of attention and care, aligning the mind and body in the pursuit of refinement. In addition, the maintenance of these instruments required discipline and knowledge. Brushes had to be cleaned without damaging their bristles, mirrors polished to preserve clarity, tweezers kept sharp yet safe, and containers carefully handled to prevent spills or contamination. This attention to the tools themselves mirrors the broader Roman ethos of careful observation, empirical experimentation, and structured care, in which the instruments of beauty were extensions of the body and its cultivated presence. The act of tending to these tools became, in itself, a component of the meditative flow of daily grooming. Social status influenced both the availability and quality of these tools. Wealthier women could acquire finely crafted brushes, high-quality mirrors, and ornate storage boxes, while women of more modest means relied on simpler, locally produced instruments. Nevertheless, even with basic tools, careful application, attention, and repeated practice allowed for effective grooming, demonstrating that skill, patience, and method were as important as material quality. The tools themselves were not merely objects, but collaborators in the process of achieving desired appearances, bridging the gap between raw ingredients and visible effect. The interaction between tools and ritualized practice further illustrates the holistic nature of Roman beauty. Brushes distributed powders over skin softened by creams, mirrors allowed precise observation of blended pigments, tweezers maintained symmetry and shape, and containers preserved the integrity of precious ingredients. Each element reinforced the others, creating a continuous, interconnected system in which careful handling, empirical knowledge, and aesthetic sensitivity were inseparable. The cumulative effect of these tools was not only visual, it engaged touch, coordination, observation, and reflection, transforming routine grooming into a deeply immersive multi-sensory experience. Ultimately, the presence of cosmetic tools and accessories demonstrates that Roman beauty practices were deliberate, disciplined, and highly structured. The body was a canvas, the materials carefully prepared, and the implements skilled extensions of the hand. Every brush stroke, mirror glance, and tweezer adjustment contributed to a coherent, polished presentation, ensuring that the layers of bathing, fragrance, makeup, and exotic ingredients were harmonized and refined. The tools themselves, maintained with care and treated with attention, became both functional and symbolic, representing a commitment to aesthetic ideals, self-discipline, and cultural literacy. Through the meditative use of brushes, mirrors, tweezers, and containers, Roman women enacted a daily ritual that combined tactile precision, visual refinement, and conscious care. These instruments, meticulously crafted and handled, were integral to the production of beauty, allowing every aspect of appearance to be observed, adjusted, and perfected. In this way, tools were not merely accessories but essential components of a sustained, immersive, and highly structured engagement with the self, appearance, and society. as Roman women cultivated their appearance through carefully layered rituals, attentive use of tools, and incorporation of exotic and animal-derived ingredients. The influence of Greek beauty practices quietly but persistently shaped their routines. The cultural exchange between Greece and Rome, intensified through conquest, trade, and education, introduced Romans to an extensive repertoire of aesthetic ideals, techniques, and philosophies that were gradually adapted to fit Roman society, preferences, and local resources. Greek conceptions of proportion, symmetry, and refinement informed not only the visual standards of beauty, but also the philosophical and practical approaches to grooming, creating a dialogue between two civilizations that spanned centuries and encompassed both the physical and conceptual dimensions of self-presentation. Greek influence was evident in the prioritization of harmonious proportions and balanced features. Philosophers, sculptors, and physicians had long emphasized the importance of symmetry, the alignment of facial and bodily dimensions, and the cultivation of a harmonious overall appearance. These principles were absorbed by Roman culture, shaping the ways in which women approached grooming and cosmetics. The careful application of powders, the arrangement of hair, the precise shaping of eyebrows, and the polishing of teeth were all subtly guided by these inherited ideals, as Roman women sought to align their features with notions of classical beauty that had been articulated in Greek thought and practice. In addition to visual principles, specific treatments and ingredients were adopted and adapted. Greek texts describe the use of olive oil as a moisturizer and cleanser, herbs for aromatic baths, and mineral-based powders for whitening and smoothing the skin. Romans embraced these substances while integrating their own regional resources, trade imports, and culinary and medical knowledge. Olive oil, widely available in the Mediterranean, became central to bathing rituals, serving both practical and aesthetic functions, softening the skin while acting as a base for powders and perfumes. The continuity of Greek methods in Roman practice underscores the selective adaptation of effective techniques, transformed to accommodate local materials, climate conditions, and evolving tastes. Greek influence also extended to hair care and styling. Texts and sculptures depict Greek women with carefully arranged hairstyles, sometimes enhanced with dyes, oils, and decorative ornaments. Roman matrons and elite women borrowed these stylistic ideas, creating elaborate coiffures that combined local aesthetics with the structural inspiration of Greek fashion. The use of braiding, curls, and hair pieces reflected an appreciation of form and rhythm in design, echoing Greek emphasis on symmetry and visual coherence. The adoption of these hairstyles also carried social and cultural weight, signaling education, refinement, and familiarity with cosmopolitan trends, linking personal appearance to broader intellectual and cultural engagement. Perfume and fragrance practices likewise bear Greek influence. Romans inherited the Greek tradition of aromatic oils, scented baths, and the layering of fragrances to enhance both presence and mood. The use of flowers, herbs, and spices in perfumed oils demonstrates continuity in sensory sophistication, while Roman adaptations introduced imported ingredients such as frankincense, myrrh, and rare resins from across the empire. These fragrances were integrated not only into personal grooming, but also into social and ritual contexts, amplifying the connection between physical presence and cultural signaling. Greek medical and cosmetic knowledge further informed Roman practices. Texts attributed to Hippocrates and other Greek physicians were studied and consulted by Roman medical practitioners and apothecaries. Recommendations regarding diet, exercise, and topical treatments for skin, hair, and overall vitality were translated into daily routines for women seeking to harmonize appearance with health. This blending of empirical observation, philosophical ideals, and practical technique illustrates how Greek frameworks were absorbed and reinterpreted, not merely copied, allowing Roman beauty practices to develop as a distinctive but historically connected tradition. The integration of Greek aesthetics also had social and cultural implications. Roman women who demonstrated familiarity with Greek techniques, or who could acquire the materials and expertise associated with these practices, signaled education, refinement, and awareness of broader cultural currents. The selective adaptation of Greek methods, whether in the use of olive oil, hairstyling, perfumes, or powdered cosmetics, was a performance of sophistication, aligning appearance with ideals that were both admired and socially valorized. In this sense, the influence of Greek beauty practices was as much about symbolic resonance as it was about functional efficacy. Furthermore, the Greek emphasis on moderation and balance resonated with Roman ideals of personal discipline and civic propriety. The careful, deliberate application of cosmetics, the measured use of perfumes, and the meticulous arrangement of hair all reflect an understanding of beauty as a cultivated, intentional practice rather than an impulsive or excessive display. Greek principles provided a conceptual foundation, while Roman women shaped these ideas into a living, functional system of aesthetic care, grounded in daily rituals and practical management of the body. Ultimately, the Greek contribution to Roman beauty practices illustrates the permeability of cultural boundaries and the ways in which ideas of aesthetics, health, and refinement were transmitted, adapted, and integrated. Roman women, while developing uniquely Roman techniques and preferences, were guided by inherited concepts of proportion, balance, and sensory sophistication, creating a continuum of practice that linked the Mediterranean world across generations. This fusion of inherited ideals and localized adaptation exemplifies the layered, reflective, and highly structured nature of Roman beauty rituals, in which every element from creams and powders to hair arrangements and fragrant oils was informed by both material observation and historical precedent. In this way, Greek influence was not merely ornamental. It shaped the intellectual and practical framework within which Roman women approached self-presentation. It reinforced attention to detail, the integration of multiple sensory modalities, and the disciplined rhythm of daily care. The continuity between Greek and Roman practices ensured that beauty remained both a tangible and a conceptual achievement, cultivated through patience, knowledge, and reflection, and experienced as a seamless flow of ritualized attention to body, appearance, and social perception. While Greek influence shaped the philosophical and aesthetic foundations of Roman beauty, the material expression of these ideals was profoundly shaped by social and economic conditions, particularly the possession of wealth and access to luxury. In the cosmopolitan milieu of Rome, cosmetics were not merely tools for personal refinement, but also markers of status, sophistication, and cultural capital. The most elaborate treatments, rare ingredients, and finely crafted instruments were largely confined to those who could afford both the financial expense and the attendant expertise required to employ them effectively, creating a hierarchy of beauty practices that mirrored the broader stratification of Roman society. Elite women had access to a remarkable range of imported and locally sourced materials that extended beyond the ordinary supplies of olive oil, chalk, or common herbs. Precious minerals, such as powdered pearls and finely crushed gemstones, were sometimes incorporated into skin preparations or cosmetics, valued for their rarity, luminescence, and symbolic association with refinement and divine favor. Resins and aromatic substances transported from regions across the empire, frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from East Africa, and expensive spices from India, found their way into oils, perfumes, and balms, enhancing the sensory richness of grooming rituals while signaling the breadth of a household's economic and cultural connections. The acquisition and preparation of such ingredients required not only financial resources, but also knowledge and skill. Wealthy women often employed specialized attendants, including skilled apothecaries and personal assistants, who understood the delicate handling, combination, and application of these rare substances. A powdered mineral, when improperly prepared or applied, could irritate the skin or fail to produce the desired effect. Aromatic oils might lose their fragrance if improperly stored. Complex creams required careful blending to achieve both efficacy and aesthetic subtlety. The employment of such expertise transformed beauty rituals into collaborative endeavors, where the presence of attendants, artisans, and imported materials underscored the distinction between elite and common practice. Luxury extended to the implements themselves. Brushes, mirrors, containers, and combs for elite households were frequently crafted from precious materials, such as ivory, silver, or finely worked wood, often adorned with carvings or inlays. The tactile and visual qualities of these instruments reinforced their symbolic significance, signaling refinement, taste, and access to resources beyond the reach of the average citizen. Even the smallest objects, such as tweezers or small cosmetic boxes, could become objects of aesthetic appreciation, transforming mundane tools into symbols of cultivated elegance. Cosmetic application, therefore, was intertwined with ceremonial attention to detail. Wealth allowed for multi-layered routines that combined rare ingredients, complex preparations, and delicate instruments into a seamless process of refinement. Creams softened and protected the skin, perfumes suffused the air, powdered pigments enhanced color, and exotic fats or slimes provided tactile and restorative benefits. Each layer of treatment built upon the previous, creating a cumulative effect that required both time and sustained attention. Luxuries that were largely inaccessible to women constrained by daily labor or limited household resources. The social dimension of cosmetic luxury was equally significant. Appearance was a public marker of refinement, an indicator not only of personal taste but also of household status, cultural literacy, and integration into elite networks. Women attending banquets, religious ceremonies, or social gatherings were expected to present themselves in a manner reflecting both aesthetic ideals and social propriety. Access to rare materials and sophisticated treatments allowed them to convey authority, elegance, and cultural awareness, signaling their position within the complex hierarchy of Roman society. In contrast, common citizens and lower-class women relied on simpler, locally available ingredients and more basic instruments. Olive oil, herbs, chalk, and common minerals were widely used, and grooming routines, while attentive, were less elaborate, less resource-intensive, and more constrained by time and labor demands. These differences did not indicate a lack of interest in personal appearance, but rather a necessary adaptation to social and economic circumstances. Even within modest households, care, skill, and ingenuity could produce effective grooming, but the sensory richness, material rarity, and ceremonial layering characteristic of elite practice remained largely unattainable. Luxury also influenced the pace and ritualization of daily grooming. Wealthy women could dedicate hours to bathing, perfuming, hairstyling, and makeup, allowing each element of their routine to be experienced fully and deliberately. The slow, meditative nature of these rituals, reinforced by rare ingredients and specialized instruments, contrasted sharply with the faster, more utilitarian routines of those with limited resources. The very rhythm of beauty, therefore, became a marker of social position. Time, attention, and access were themselves indicators of refinement, reinforcing both material and temporal distinctions between classes. In this context, luxury was inseparable from the sensory, symbolic, and social dimensions of Roman beauty. Fragrance, texture, color, and tactile pleasure were enhanced by rarity and skill, while social perception, status signaling, and cultural alignment were supported by the deliberate orchestration of complex routines. Wealth enabled women to inhabit a comprehensive system of aesthetic refinement, in which each action, each brush stroke, application of powder, or massage of scented oil was experienced fully, layered with historical precedent, spiritual significance, and social meaning. Ultimately, the integration of luxury into Roman cosmetics demonstrates the deeply structured, multi-dimensional nature of beauty practices. It was not only the substances or the techniques themselves that mattered, but also the deliberate cultivation of a continuous immersive experience. Rare ingredients, skilled attendants, and finely crafted instruments created a layered engagement with the body, sensation, and society, ensuring that appearance was both materially rich and culturally resonant. Luxury in this sense was not mere indulgence but an essential component of aesthetic, social, and sensory coherence, shaping the way beauty was both practiced and perceived across the stratified world of ancient Rome. While the use of rare ingredients, exotic perfumes, and elaborate instruments distinguished the elite in Roman society, beauty practices were never experienced in isolation. They existed within a complex social framework, in which public perception, moral commentary, and cultural critique intersected with private routines. The pursuit of appearance, particularly when pursued with intensity or excess, attracted attention, reflection, and sometimes censure. Roman writers, philosophers, and satirists frequently commented on the rituals and behaviors associated with grooming, offering insight into societal attitudes toward vanity, refinement, and the boundaries between acceptable care and perceived obsession. Satirical literature provides one of the clearest windows into how beauty routines were perceived. Comedic plays, epigrams, and satires lampooned women, who devoted extraordinary attention to their appearance, highlighting both the sensory extravagance of cosmetic application and the social implications of visible refinement. The exaggeration of powders, perfumes, and hairstyles served as a literary device, allowing authors to explore broader themes of morality, social ambition, and gendered expectation. These depictions suggest that while beauty was admired and sought after, excessive focus on grooming could provoke ridicule, reinforcing a delicate balance between refinement and overindulgence. Philosophers and moralists offered parallel forms of critique. Stoic and Cynic writers in particular emphasized moderation, discipline, and the cultivation of inner virtue over outward display. Excessive attention to cosmetics was sometimes portrayed as evidence of moral weakness, distraction from civic duty, or susceptibility to vanity. Within these frameworks, beauty was acceptable insofar as it reflected proportion, harmony, and personal discipline, but when appearance became an end in itself, it was interpreted as a form of moral and social imbalance. These perspectives suggest that Roman attitudes toward grooming were nuanced, recognizing both aesthetic and ethical dimensions. At the same time, public commentary reveals that the visible manifestations of beauty carried broader social weight. Women of the elite, adorned with rare perfumes, powdered skin, and intricately styled hair, were not only expressing personal taste, but also signaling household status, wealth, and cultural literacy. Observers in both private and public spheres could read these markers, interpreting the intensity and style of grooming as a reflection of character, social position, or moral sensibility. Excess, neglect, or visible imperfection became fodder for judgment, while balanced and skillful presentation earned admiration or respect. The interplay between perception and practice underscores that Roman beauty routines were socially embedded, entwined with evaluation, expectation, and subtle negotiation of identity. Public scrutiny also intersected with gendered norms. While both men and women engaged in grooming, societal focus and criticism often centered on women, whose appearance was linked more directly to social influence, marital prospects, and familial honor. Satirical texts frequently depicted women as overly indulgent, manipulating perfumes, powders, and adornments in ways that suggested vanity or moral laxity. At the same time, these critiques reflect cultural anxieties about power, display, and autonomy, highlighting the complex terrain within which beauty practices were performed and observed. Despite criticism, Roman women continued to engage in elaborate grooming rituals, balancing the expectations of social propriety with the pursuit of aesthetic refinement. The awareness of potential judgment influenced the pacing, subtlety, and presentation of beauty routines. Perfumes might be applied in measured amounts, powders blended for natural effect, and hairstyle to convey elegance rather than ostentation. In this way, public perception shaped practice as much as private preference, demonstrating a continuous dialogue between individual choice, cultural norms, and social critique. The tension between admiration and criticism also extended to the material and economic dimensions of beauty. The possession of rare substances and specialized tools was a visible indicator of status, yet the display of wealth in personal grooming could be both celebrated and questioned. Roman literature often reflects this ambivalence, simultaneously acknowledging the skill, knowledge, and sensory sophistication involved in cosmetic practice, while warning against excessive indulgence or moral imbalance. The duality of admiration and critique highlights the sophisticated cultural framework in which beauty was understood as both a personal and communal endeavor. In observing these societal attitudes, it becomes evident that beauty in ancient Rome was a performance with multiple layers. Individual grooming practices were intertwined with moral discourse, social expectation, and literary reflection, creating a rich tapestry of meaning in which cosmetics, ritual, and public perception were inseparable. The deliberate, careful, and often meditative nature of grooming routines allowed women to navigate these tensions, presenting an appearance that aligned with both personal aspiration and culturally endorsed ideals. Ultimately, Public perception and social criticism reveal that Roman beauty practices were neither superficial nor arbitrary. They were embedded in a broader ethical, cultural and social matrix in which appearance, behavior, and societal values were closely interlinked. The attention to detail, the use of exotic ingredients, and the engagement with ritual and expertise were not merely personal indulgences but conscious acts situated within a complex system of observation, commentary, and expectation. Through this lens, the pursuit of beauty can be understood as both a deeply private ritual and a socially mediated performance, continuously negotiated within the layered texture of Roman life. While much attention in historical records and literary sources is devoted to the elaborate grooming practices of Roman women, men too engaged in their own rituals of personal care, reflecting a concern with appearance, hygiene, and social presentation. In Rome, the aesthetics of masculinity were intertwined with notions of discipline, citizenship, and social status. Yet within these frameworks, men cultivated their appearance with careful attention to hair, beard, skin, and overall bodily presentation. Grooming was thus not exclusively a female pursuit. It was a structured, deliberate, and socially significant aspect of male identity. Beard care occupied a particularly prominent place in male grooming. The presence or absence of facial hair was not merely a matter of style but a marker of age, status, philosophical affiliation, and personal taste. Some men maintained closely shaven faces, employing razors, tweezers, and depilatory ointments to achieve smoothness, while others allowed hair to grow in prescribed styles associated with philosophical schools or social groups. Barbers or tonsors provided specialized services for shaving, trimming, and shaping facial hair, using finely crafted instruments such as bronze razors and sharp, pointed tweezers. The act of shaving was both functional and symbolic, reflecting the deliberate cultivation of appearance and adherence to social norms of presentation. Hair care extended beyond the face to the scalp and body. Roman men applied oils to soften, nourish, and condition hair, often using scented formulations that enhanced the tactile and aromatic experience of grooming. Oils derived from olive, almond, and other plants were massaged into the scalp, improving manageability, sheen, and health while serving a sensory function that complemented public presentation. Some men experimented with hair removal beyond the beard, removing excess or coarse hair from the chest, back, and limbs to achieve smoothness, considered aesthetically pleasing or associated with youth, vigor, and hygiene. The selection of oils, depilatory mixtures, and massage techniques was informed by both practical and cultural considerations, integrating health, sensory pleasure, and social perception into a continuous ritual. Cosmetics, although less elaborate than those used by women, were also part of male grooming practices. Powders and creams were sometimes applied to even out complexion, reduce the appearance of blemishes, or counteract the effects of sun and labor. Subtle pigments could be used to highlight features, and occasionally, scented powders were dusted over the skin to enhance freshness and presence. The use of these products required discretion, as excessive application could attract criticism or ridicule. Therefore, male grooming emphasized moderation, control, and refinement, rather than theatrical enhancement. Barbershops and bathhouses provided important spaces for male grooming. Within these communal environments, men could access specialized services, exchange knowledge of techniques, and engage in social observation. The bathhouse itself was a site of ritualized cleansing, where the combination of immersion, scrubbing, and oil application formed a continuous process of hygiene and aesthetic refinement. All men could observe the effects of products and tools, compare practices, and integrate new methods into personal routines, highlighting the interplay between communal experience and private grooming. The tools employed by men were often similar in craftsmanship and quality to those used by women, albeit adapted for different functions. Razors were sharpened to ensure smooth shaving, tweezers carefully honed for precise shaping, and brushes or cloths used to distribute oils evenly across hair and skin. All mirrors, whether polished metal or rare glass, provided a reflective surface for careful inspection, reinforcing the meditative and deliberate nature of grooming. The attention to these implements underscores the sophisticated, structured character of male personal care, in which skill, precision, and patience were central to effective outcomes. Philosophical and social considerations influenced male grooming as well. Stoic ideals emphasized moderation, cleanliness, and self-discipline, aligning grooming practices with broader ethical and civic values. Excessive attention to cosmetics could be criticized, yet a well-groomed appearance was understood as compatible with refinement, health, and social propriety. The balance between care and restraint was a guiding principle, reflecting a cultural understanding in which aesthetic presentation was inseparable from character, comportment, and public perception. Regional, seasonal, and environmental factors also shaped male grooming. Sun exposure, labor-intensive activities, and climate influenced the use of oils, powders, and protective creams, while the timing of bathing, shaving, and oil application was sometimes adjusted to accommodate temperature, humidity, and daily schedules. In this way, male grooming routines were not static but adaptive, integrating observation, material knowledge, and experiential awareness into a continuous practice of care. Overall, Roman men's grooming practices reveal a careful calibration of aesthetics, health, and social signaling. Hair, beard, skin, and overall presentation were managed through structured routines that employed tools, oils, powders, and skilled labor. These practices were performed with deliberation, sensitivity to social perception, and alignment with cultural ideals, creating a system in which appearance, refinement, and personal discipline were mutually reinforcing. While often less elaborately documented than female routines, male grooming was no less immersive, sensory, or socially significant, demonstrating that the pursuit of beauty in Rome was a shared dimension of daily life, experienced across gender, status, and public-private spheres. Through these methods, men navigated the balance between natural appearance and deliberate enhancement, integrating material, sensory, and social dimensions into a continuous practice of grooming. The careful use of oils, powders, tools, and ritualized observation ensured that personal care was experienced as a structured, deliberate, and aesthetically coherent process. Male grooming, like its female counterpart, reflected a broader Roman understanding of the body as a site of cultivation, refinement, and social expression, in which daily routines connected material technique, sensory experience, and cultural expectation in an enduring and seamless flow of practice. The Roman environment, with its Mediterranean climate, bustling urban centers, and varying regional conditions, played a substantial role in shaping beauty routines and grooming practices. Women and men alike were attentive not only to aesthetic ideals, but also to the challenges posed by sun, wind, heat, humidity, and the dust and soot of crowded cities. Seasonal variations prompted adjustments in bathing, application of oils and powders, and the use of protective or restorative treatments, reflecting a practical empirical awareness of how external conditions influenced skin, hair, and overall appearance. Summer presented particular challenges, as the Mediterranean sun could cause tanning, dryness, and premature aging of the skin. The brightness of the sun and heat exposure necessitated careful attention to creams, powders, and oils that both moisturized and protected the epidermis. Roman women sometimes applied layers of oil to create a protective barrier, followed by powders that could reduce shine and even out tone. Men, while less inclined toward cosmetic layering, relied on oils and careful cleansing to mitigate the effects of heat and sweat, particularly on the face and scalp. Baths were scheduled more frequently during hotter months, and the combination of soaking, exfoliation, and oiling was adapted to maintain both hygiene and aesthetic integrity under climatic stress. Winter, by contrast, imposed dryness and cold, which could crack or irritate the skin and dull hair. Roman cosmetic routines adapted accordingly. Richer oils and creams were applied more generously, sometimes blended with aromatic substances that also provided sensory comfort and warmth. Protective ointments were used to seal moisture, while bath routines incorporated warmer waters to mitigate the effects of the cold. Hair, which could become brittle in dry conditions, was treated with nourishing oils, and sometimes wrapped or styled to minimize exposure. In this way, seasonal variations were not incidental. They actively dictated the timing, composition, and intensity of grooming practices. Urban conditions imposed additional considerations. Rome, A densely populated city with narrow streets, open fires and heavy traffic of carts and animals created a constant exposure to dust, soot and smoke. Skin, hair and clothing were subject to accumulation of grime and odor, necessitating both preventive and restorative care. Bathing became not only a ritual of aesthetic enhancement, but also a practical response to environmental stresses. Exfoliation, scrubbing with strigils, and the application of oils and powders functioned simultaneously as protection, cleansing, and preparation for social interaction. The interplay between environment and grooming illustrates the adaptability and empirical observation that characterized Roman routines. Geographic variation also influenced practice. Coastal areas with higher humidity and salt exposure necessitated different care compared to inland or highland regions, where dryness and dust were more prevalent. Wealthy households in cities could compensate with imported oils, balms and powders, while those in rural settings relied on locally sourced ingredients and practical adjustments. Observations about hair brittleness, skin irritation or changes in color and texture prompted ongoing experimentation, refining both the substances and the methods used to counteract environmental effects. This responsiveness demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of how climate, geography, and urbanity interacted with bodily care. The seasonal and environmental influences extended to social and ceremonial considerations. Public appearances, festivals, and gatherings were often planned with awareness of climatic conditions, influencing the choice of clothing, hairstyles, and the timing of beauty rituals. Women and men adjusted their routines to ensure that appearance remained polished, balanced, and resilient under varying environmental pressures. This deliberate adaptation underscores the integrated nature of Roman grooming, in which personal, aesthetic, and environmental factors were harmonized through careful observation, technique, and material application. Tools and instruments were likewise responsive to these influences. Brushes and applicators were maintained with attention to dust and moisture, mirrors were cleaned to ensure clarity despite soot exposure, and containers protected powders and oils from contamination. The practical care of instruments paralleled the care of the body itself, reflecting a holistic approach in which both material objects and personal appearance required consideration of environmental variables. Fragrances and aromatic oils also had adaptive significance. In dusty, smoky, or hot conditions, scented oils could mitigate unpleasant odors, reduce the perception of environmental contamination, and provide a subtle enhancement to presence and social interaction. These adaptations demonstrate that sensory pleasure, aesthetic effect, and practical function were continuously intertwined. The experience of grooming engaged sight, touch, and smell, creating an immersive, responsive process attuned to both inner intent and external conditions. In essence, Roman beauty routines were not static prescriptions but dynamic practices responsive to climate, urban life, and seasonal shifts. The careful layering of oils, powders, exfoliants, and aromatic substances was informed by empirical observation, sensory awareness, and practical necessity. These practices illustrate a culture deeply attuned to environmental impact on the body, integrating protective, restorative, and aesthetic measures into daily routines that were simultaneously structured, immersive, and adaptive. Through this attentiveness to the natural and built environment, Roman men and women achieved an equilibrium between external pressures and internal ideals, ensuring that the pursuit of beauty remained continuous, resilient, and contextually sensitive. Each bath, oil application, powdering, and hair treatment was not only an aesthetic act, but also a measured response to the ever-changing conditions of sun, wind, dust, and humidity, reflecting a sophisticated and deeply embedded understanding of the interplay between environment and the cultivated human form. In the complex landscape of Roman beauty, the presence of attendants, assistants, and specialized slaves was a defining feature of elite grooming routines. While the selection of ingredients, preparation of creams, and careful application of powders and oils formed the visible aspects of personal care, much of the labor, skill, and orchestration behind these practices was carried out by individuals whose expertise and diligence were essential to achieving the desired aesthetic outcome. These figures, often trained from youth or drawn from specialized households, occupied a critical, though largely invisible, role in maintaining the continuity, precision, and refinement of daily grooming. For women of the elite, hairdressers and cosmetic attendants were indispensable. Elaborate hairstyles, frequently incorporating braids, curls, wigs, and decorative ornaments, demanded hours of preparation, careful manipulation, and the use of multiple tools. Attendants were trained to manage these tasks with patience and skill, understanding the subtle interplay between hair texture, volume, style, and ornamentation. They would handle oils, pomades, combs, pins, and other accessories, ensuring that each strand, twist, or curl conformed to both aesthetic ideals and current fashion trends. The success of an intricate coiffure depended as much on the dexterity and knowledge of these attendants as on the materials themselves. Beyond hair, cosmetic application was another domain in which slaves and assistants were central. Powders, creams, and pigments had to be carefully mixed to achieve the correct texture, hue, and consistency. Attendants applied these substances to the face, neck, and hands, often following instructions that balanced personal preference, social expectation, and cultural symbolism. The blending of powdered lead, chalk, or crushed minerals into smooth, even layers required delicate technique, while the subtle shading of rouge, lip stain, or eye pigment demanded an eye for proportion, symmetry, and the harmony of features. Through their labor, attendants transformed raw materials into an integrated expression of beauty, contributing materially and aesthetically to the process. The application of perfumes and scented oils similarly relied upon trained assistants. Roman women and men possessed a range of aromatic substances, some of which were expensive, rare, or delicate. Attendants measured, mixed, and distributed these oils in precise quantities, ensuring that fragrance was neither overpowering nor fleeting. They might also store and maintain these substances, protecting them from spoilage, dust, and heat, preserving both quality and efficacy. In this sense, the work of assistants extended beyond mere physical application, encompassing stewardship of resources, technical skill, and continuity of sensory experience. Bathing, cleansing, and exfoliation were additional areas in which specialized slaves contributed. Scrubbing the body, manipulating strigils, massaging oils into the skin, and ensuring cleanliness required both strength and careful technique. Attendants had to gauge the pressure of the strigil, the temperature of oils or water, and the rhythm of application, creating a seamless experience that combined hygiene, relaxation, and sensory enhancement. This labor-intensive aspect of grooming demonstrates that personal beauty in elite Roman households was rarely solitary. It was enacted as a collaborative, immersive process in which knowledge, technique, and attentiveness were mediated through trained hands. The social implications of this dependence were profound. The presence of attendants signaled wealth, status, and sophistication, marking the household as capable of sustaining prolonged and carefully orchestrated routines. The visibility of grooming rituals, whether through the presence of slaves in public baths, the preparation of elaborate cosmetics, or the orchestration of hair-styling sessions, communicated both material resources and cultural literacy. These practices reinforced hierarchical structures, distinguishing those who could afford attendants from those who managed grooming personally, while simultaneously reflecting broader social expectations of refinement and propriety. Training, apprenticeship, and specialization were central to the effectiveness of these attendants. Many were instructed from youth in the preparation of ingredients, the use of tools, and the application of treatments. Some were trained specifically in hairdressing or cosmetic mixing, while others acquired proficiency in aromatic oils, massages, or depilatory techniques. Their expertise was honed through observation, repetition, and supervision, ensuring that every gesture, combination, and rhythm contributed to a harmonious and socially acceptable presentation. This cultivated skill made attendants indispensable collaborators in the realization of aesthetic ideals. Attendants also played a subtle role in shaping trends and practices. As intermediaries between materials, clients, and cultural knowledge, they observed responses to new ingredients, emerging techniques, and seasonal adaptations. They might recommend modifications, suggest new blends of oils or powders, or anticipate the needs of clients according to social occasions. In this way, the labor of attendance was not merely mechanical, but also interpretive, mediating between personal preference, material availability, and evolving cultural standards. In sum, the integration of slaves and specialized assistants into Roman beauty routines highlights the collaborative, socially embedded, and highly structured nature of personal care. Elite grooming was a multi-layered process in which the careful orchestration of materials, tools, and labor ensured both aesthetic refinement and social resonance. Through their skill, attentiveness, and experiential knowledge, attendants enabled a seamless, immersive practice of beauty, reflecting the interplay between personal aspiration, technical mastery, and cultural expectation. The presence of these assistants also underscores the broader conceptualization of beauty as a cumulative, process-oriented practice. Each application of oil, brushstroke of powder, or twist of hair was part of an extended temporal and sensory continuum, mediated through the expertise of others, yet integrated with personal intention. Grooming, in this sense, was not merely cosmetic. It was an embodied performance of refinement, a negotiation of social position, and an orchestration of sensory experience, sustained through collaboration, skill, and deliberate attention. While oils, powders, and meticulous grooming routines shaped the visible aspects of Roman beauty, the culture also recognized the profound connection between internal health and outward appearance. Diet, physical activity, and herbal remedies were integrated into the concept of beauty, reflecting a holistic understanding that what nourished and strengthened the body from within would inevitably manifest in the skin, hair, posture, and overall presence. Elite Roman households, in particular, incorporated these practices with deliberation, linking nutrition, exercise, and remedial consumption to both aesthetic refinement and general wellness. Nutrition was a central component of this internal regimen. The diet of those with means included a variety of grains, fruits, vegetables, meats, and fish, carefully selected for their perceived effects on complexion, vitality, and bodily balance. Fresh fruits and vegetables, especially those rich in vitamins and minerals, were believed to support skin health and maintain a youthful glow. Olive oil, not only a staple in cooking, but also a key ingredient in grooming, was also consumed to nourish the body, contribute to smooth skin, and support hair strength. Additionally, certain foods were prized for their capacity to counteract the effects of aging or seasonal stresses, integrating culinary selection into the broader practice of beauty. Herbal remedies were employed as both preventive and restorative measures. Decoctions, infusions, and topical applications from plants such as rosemary, fennel, and lavender were used to purify the body, stimulate circulation, and enhance skin tone. The careful administration of these botanical treatments reflected a sophisticated awareness of the interactions between internal physiology and outward appearance. Women might consume teas to promote clear complexion, while men employed tonics to support hair health, energy, and stamina. These interventions were measured, habitual, and intertwined with daily routines, forming a seamless bridge between internal cultivation and external presentation. Physical activity also played a vital role in Roman notions of beauty. Exercise was valued for its capacity to tone the body, enhance posture, and promote vigor, all of which contributed to perceived attractiveness and social perception. Activities ranged from structured routines in private courtyards or gymnasia to walking, horseback riding, or participation in athletic events. The goal was not solely muscular development, but overall vitality, balance, and coordination, qualities believed to reflect both health and refinement. For women, moderate exercise supported bodily tone and flexibility, complementing cosmetic practices and enhancing the effects of oils, powders, and massages applied during grooming rituals. Bathing, as discussed in previous points, intersected with diet and exercise, creating a comprehensive system of internal and external care. The thermal and hydrotherapy components of Roman baths were believed to stimulate circulation, cleanse the body, and prepare the skin to absorb oils and fragrances effectively. Exfoliation removed dead cells and enhanced absorption of nutrients from topical treatments, creating a continuity between internal nourishment and visible outcomes. The careful attention to temperature, duration and sequence of bathing activities was therefore informed not only by sensory pleasure, but also by an understanding of physiological effects on skin, hair, and overall appearance. Social observation reinforced the link between internal practices and beauty. A woman's complexion, posture, and gait could reveal her level of nourishment, exercise, and attention to bodily maintenance, just as a man's vigor and physical presence were interpreted as indicators of vitality and discipline. Household members, attendants, and peers could recognize evidence of diet, herbal care, and physical activity, meaning that beauty was continuously assessed not only through cosmetic application, but also through the body's natural expression. The internal regimen was thus inseparable from social performance, creating a feedback loop in which appearance both reflected and reinforced the habits of daily life. Furthermore, knowledge of diet and exercise was often mediated through medical and philosophical writings. Physicians and moralists advised on the consumption of specific foods, the timing and intensity of exercise, and the preparation of herbal remedies, linking ethical conduct, lifestyle, and aesthetic outcome. The integration of these recommendations into daily routines reflected a disciplined approach to beauty, one in which sensory indulgence, material application, and internal cultivation were harmonized through careful planning and experiential awareness. Ultimately, internal beauty practices illustrate the Roman understanding that outward refinement was contingent upon internal well-being. Cosmetics, perfumes, and grooming tools were complemented by a conscientious attention to food, herbal interventions, and physical conditioning, creating a continuous system in which the body was both instrument and canvas. Youthful skin, glossy hair, supple muscles, and graceful posture were not merely natural gifts but the product of deliberate, sustained, and attentive care, rooted in the interconnectedness of physiology, habit, and social expectation. By attending to internal and external dimensions together, Romans achieved a form of holistic beauty that was simultaneously functional, aesthetic, and socially resonant. The labor of attendants, the preparation of rare ingredients, and the careful orchestration of baths, oils, and powders were mirrored by attentiveness to nutrition, exercise, and herbal remedies. This comprehensive approach reinforced the perception of refinement, vitality, and status, embedding beauty deeply within both the sensory and ethical life of the individual. As the centuries progressed and the Roman Empire faced political, economic, and social upheaval, the carefully cultivated beauty rituals that had flourished for generations began to experience both decline and transformation. The elaborate routines, the rare and exotic ingredients, and the skilled attendants that had defined elite grooming became increasingly difficult to sustain in the face of shifting cultural priorities, scarcity of resources, and the fragmentation of centralized authority. What had once been accessible to a class capable of maintaining vast households, extensive trade networks, and specialized labor became gradually constrained by circumstances, necessitating adaptation, simplification, and redefinition of aesthetic practice. The economic challenges of the later empire played a crucial role. Trade routes that had once supplied aromatic oils, exotic pigments, rare minerals, and foreign botanical substances became less reliable as conflicts, piracy, and political instability disrupted supply chains. Ingredients that had been central to powders, creams, and perfumes were now scarce or prohibitively expensive, prompting the substitution of locally available materials, simplified recipes, or the reduction of elaborate mixtures to essential practical components. Lead-based powders, chalk, and commonly cultivated herbs replaced rarer substances, and the luxurious layering of oils and fragrances became more selective and restrained. The scarcity of materials directly influenced the appearance of the Roman elite, altering both the visual presentation of skin, hair, and nails, and the experiential aspects of grooming itself.